Welcome back to Prospect Analytics. Hope you all enjoyed part one of our sit down with MLB Pipeline's Jim Callis. Today in part two, he's going to talk about how he got into prospecting and also tell us who's the best prospect that he's ever personally seen. Along with that, he's going to give us a little bit of insight into his actual process for ranking prospects and what he looks for, and also gives us his odds-on favorite to be the number one prospect entering the 2027 season. All right, we are joined today by senior writer from MLB Pipeline, Jim Callis. How's everything going today, Jim?
It's going good. It feels nice to have all the top 30s and the farm system rankings done. Now we can kind of shift our full attention to spring training.
Yeah, absolutely. And we wanted to talk about those top 30. But first of all, how did you get into, I know people ask me because I do prospecting on a much smaller scale than you do, but how did you get into prospecting? Why prospects?
It's kind of been my whole career. I was at the University of Georgia and I was in journalism school and covering sports for the newspaper. And the first year I covered baseball at Georgia was 1987, which was the first time we'd ever gone to the College World Series. And we had 2 first-round picks and 3 big leaguers on the team. And I'd started in Baseball America. I think I was in college. I don't think I was in high school when I started reading Baseball America. It started in the early 80s. This was mid-80s when I was going to college. But anyway, just really enjoyed Baseball America. Nobody else was covering baseball, like Baseball America was at the time, really. And through covering the baseball team, this was so long ago that to get Baseball America's rankings, their top 25 college rankings every week, you had to call them and they would read them to you over the phone. I don't even think they had fax technology necessarily at the time. So anyway, I kind of built up a relationship just talking to the people at Baseball America, and then while getting an internship and parlaying that into a full-time job. And I'm still doing it. I started full-time in December 88, and I'm still doing it. I've worked for Stats Inc., and I'm at MLB.com now, but kind of pretty much done mostly the same thing the whole time. And it's still, I was having this conversation with the scouting director the other day who's done it for a long time. And he was saying how it still interests him to go out and find players. And I was like, it still interests me to try to figure out, is this guy better than that guy and why after all these years. So that's kind of how I got into it.
And are you the same way as me in that, once a guy's no longer a prospect, you're just like, I mean, obviously I'm a baseball fan, but people all the time will be like, oh, so what about Roman Anthony this year? And I'm like, oh, well, he's not a prospect anymore.
I mean, to some degree, it is like we have other people cover the major leagues, and I follow the major leagues because you kind of have to. I don't follow them diligently. I always say, like, I haven't played fantasy baseball in decades. Just the daily aspect of it is too much. I don't want to have to deal with that. But I feel like I would know the major leagues a lot better if I were in a daily league or in a league because, they're not dead to me. I'll still kind of have an eye on how Roman Anthony's doing or if Konnor Griffin makes open day roster. I won't stop caring about him on the 46th day of the season. But yeah, like we're pretty busy from January through August, and then it lightens up a little bit, but it's not like we're not doing anything. And then it gets busy again. We start doing draft stuff in November. So there's not a whole lot of time where you're just like, okay, I'm not doing anything for 2 weeks. I can just chill out and catch up. But yeah, I guess the best way to put it is I would fail if you gave me a current events quiz of what's going on in the big leagues, like maybe not the big picture things, but like, okay, who's third in the American League with 20 homers out of nowhere? I would struggle with that stuff because I don't keep up with that. And similarly, we'll start after we get done with spring training, diving into the draft, which isn't all consuming, but it's mostly consuming for the next 3 months, starting at the end of March, going into mid-July. And even on the minor league side of things, I find that, the 8 or 10 teams that I do top 30s for or oversee, I keep up with them. But if it's one of the other teams and it's not like a big time prospect, I'm not necessarily going to know how like the number 6 prospect in the Reds organization, whether he's having a good year or bad year or got hurt, I'm not going to have any idea. Like, so they're not dead to me, but I care about Roman Anthony less than I did a year ago.
It's so funny because I'm the same way, and people are always so confused by the fact that I don't continue to follow these guys because I do it for obviously Bowman card purposes, but I'm the same way. Whereas once they're no longer a prospect, I'm on to the next draft class, and I'll have people all the time be like, oh, is Jacob Wilson a buy right now? And I'm like, I couldn't tell you what Jacob Wilson's cards are going for. I couldn't tell you what
Yeah.
Jacob Wilson bad, so it's kind of like the same way. It's like I follow them up to a point and then there's a whole new crop. Now, obviously you've been doing this a long time. Is there someone, I'm sure there's a lot of people in the past, but is there anyone in particular that you scouted that the second you saw him, you were like, this is like a sure thing? Like, what's the most sure thing prospect you've ever scouted?
I don't know if I've ever been asked it like that. And, it's funny because it's different. Because when I started, I'm going to sound old, there was no internet. We did not have, maybe cell phones existed. Well, I couldn't pop up video players on my cell phone. I couldn't access Synergy to see what somebody's swing and miss rate on end zone fastballs was. So, like when I started Baseball America, we were fortunate because they're still based in Durham, North Carolina. And we had every level of the minor leagues except for the complex league, and I guess short season ball. But we had AAA, AA, single A, high A, even rookie ball within driving distance. So you could kind of see players in those leagues, but it wasn't like you were seeing every AAA player. You'd see the guys in the international league type of thing. So I'm trying to think, like, since we've actually been to witness guys. I don't know. Maybe the first one would have been Mark Pryor, and there must have again. I mean, I don't know. My first college World Series, I went to go see, I saw Ben McDonald, and Ben McDonald was regarded as the biggest slam dunk #1 pick in draft history at that point. So Ben McDonald looked pretty can't miss too. But it would probably be guys I saw at the College World Series. I remember seeing Derek Jeter in Greensboro, and he was good, but it wasn't like you were like, oh, that guy's going to get 3,400 hits and win however many World Series it was. He didn't pop like that. I never saw A-Rod. I still say A-Rod's the best prospect I've covered, but I never saw him play until we saw him in the big leagues. He didn't spend much time in the minors.
Right. Was there anyone like the opposite? Anyone that you saw that you're like, this is going to be a guy, and he ended up, everyone has their bust stories, but is there anyone in particular you scouted that looked like they were going to be a legit major league player that ended up kind of flaming out?
Oh, I'm sure there must be. It's hard. I know, because we talked about this. I wasn't at MLB.com at the time, but when MLB.com started ranking prospects, I think Greg Miller was number 2 on one of their first lists, and he never made it to the big leagues, and he got hurt. I remember back in the day when I started, Roger Salkeld looked really good. I mean, I guess the guy who would jump out, because some guys still, will tell you he might be the best left-handed pitching prospect I've ever seen, would be Brian Taylor, who was the #1 pick in the draft in '91, which was my third year at Baseball America. And, there wasn't video. We didn't have, the showcase circuit, and you'd break down all these metrics. But I mean, he was throwing upper 90s back when not many guys threw in the upper 90s. I mean, this was back when it was funny. I've been doing this long enough. When I started Baseball America, if a guy threw consistently in the 90s, that was throwing hard. It was different radar gun technology, and it measured it when it crossed the plate instead of when it left the guy's hand. So it was totally different. But Brian Taylor, threw really, really hard and had a really good breaking ball. And, I don't know if some of the people who listen to this probably go like, who's Brian Taylor? Never heard of that guy, because he never played in the big leagues, because he got to AA and then he got in an off-field. His brother got in a fight off the field, and when he tried to intervene, his shoulder got hurt, and he was never the same again. So he never pitched in. He's one of the few #1 picks who never played, #1 overall picks who never played in the big league. So he'd probably be one. I know more recently, I thought Jaron Kendall was going to be a really good player, out of Vanderbilt. I thought the Dodgers got a steal when they got him in the 20s in draft, and he's done. I mean, he never hit. So he's a recent one, whereas a guy I really liked, and I was like, yeah, I believe in this guy. But I mean, that's kind of what's fun. I mean, I don't know if it's fun from your aspect too. Although if you're investing, I guess when you're wrong, you lose money. So it's probably not as fun. But I was gonna say what makes the whole thing interesting is there's no right or wrong answers. You don't know, and you aren't going to know until 5-10 years down the road. Right now, Konnor Griffin looks like he's going to be tremendous, and he probably will be. But I think back to Adley Rutschman, who is a good player, but he's kind of at a crossroads right now. Adley Rutschman looked early on like he might win some MVP awards, and last year it's kind of like, what's going on with Adley Rutschman? And not that. I don't think I ever say, oh, this guy's going to make the Hall of Fame when they're prospects, because that's kind of ridiculous. But Adley Rutschman looked like, okay, that's what Hall of Fame catcher seems to look like, and he got off to a good start. And then a couple of years later, now we're like, well, how good exactly is Adley Rutschman?
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned the difference in when you have your money invested. Do you follow Bowman baseball cards or any sort of
I mean, I know
hobby like
generally
that?
what they are, but I've never like invested or followed prices or that type of stuff.
Because you're talking about the high expectations. I actually mentioned it on an episode the other day. Konnor Griffin right now, his first Bowman base autograph, he's like neck and neck with Roman Anthony. And when he steps on the field for the first time, he will likely pass him because the hype keeps going. And when he makes his major league debut, the only players in Major League Baseball with a more expensive autograph than him are going to be Ohtani, Judge, Trout, and Soto. Those are the only four.
Well, the one I remember, because every once in a while, like, I'll sometimes get interviewed from like the baseball card aspect. I remember a couple of years ago, like the hype around Jason Dominguez was insane.
Oh yeah.
And again, I like he was so up and down and inconsistent, where he'd look really good at times and not good at times. I feel like he's managing the zone really well at times. Other times it looks like he's just taking strikes. Like what's going on there? And I was never really sure what to make of that guy. And I remember, I don't know the details, but there was some like one-on-one special card that was going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. He hadn't even been to the big leagues yet. And I was like, you've got to be crazy to pay for that. Like, at least when you're spending, millions on a Mickey Mantle 1951 card, like Mickey's value is established and the rarity of the card. This is just like, no offense, Jason, the Yankees have not sought fit to play Jason Dominguez in the playoffs. He's been on their bench, and like somebody was spending like hundreds of thousands of dollars for this unique card, and that boggles my mind. It's crazy.
And it's crazy with Konnor because obviously we all think that Konnor will live up to that hype. Like Connor's a tremendous player, but I mean he's priced higher than Ronald Acuna Jr. He's priced higher than there are like perennial Cy Young and MVP candidates who are not as highly regarded in the card community as Konnor Griffin. It's just kind of crazy to see, the kind of pressure that's been put on this kid's shoulders as a 19-year-old who hasn't even, made a major league debut yet.
Well, I mean, if you go back and look at guys who were like the number one prospects in baseball, I mean, a year ago, who was everybody's number one prospect? Roki Sasaki. Like, and he's a little bit different, but again, what's going to happen with him? You go back in time, Matt Wieters was once the number one prospect in baseball, and he had a good career, but he didn't live up to expectation. Jason Hayward, I think at one point was number one prospect in baseball. Delman Young, like how Delman Young work out. So, like, it's always interesting to me. I mean, I think anything that creates interest in the industry is good for baseball. And so, like, sure. I don't look down my nose at this stuff, but I'm just like, man, people are just like, going all in on some guys, and it's risky.
I love that you mentioned Jason Hayward. I'm a Braves fan, and I can tell you where I was when he hit that home run off Carlos Zambrano, and I was like, this is it. This is our guy for the next 20 years. It's crazy how things like that.
And Freddie Freeman wound up being better. Like,
and then a couple of years later, it might actually been the year after Hayward or year before, it was Jordan Schaefer. He came up and he did the same thing. He had I remember him getting intentionally walked in his first game after he had hit a homer and a double. And I was like, oh, the Braves found their guy. You really just don't know. It's crazy.
It's tough. And like, even when guy, like we were just mentioning Rutschman, like the way his career started, like looked like he was going to be the best catcher in baseball and perennial MVP candidate. And he just had that weird year. Like I with him, I kind of feel like we're going to find out he wasn't fully healthy. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me, but like, it's just tough. Or you look at a guy, Andrew Benintendi was the number one prospect in baseball. And the start of his career, he came up and he made that great catch. I think when he was like first came up where he flipped over the outfield wall, I think Tampa Bay, and, was on a playoff team. And then he was like really strong rookie season, helped him win a World Series. And you're like, okay, this guy looks like he's going to win batting titles one day, and he's got power. And now, I mean, he's done okay for himself, but he's just kind of like your average everyday outfielder. And at one point, Andrew Benintendi looked like he was going to be a star.
That's how I like to tell, all the people who collect cards. To this day, the most money I've ever spent on a singular baseball card was a Yoan Moncada autograph. Yep. And I still have it to this day. I'm not going to sell it out of principle because I'm like, this is what happens when you think you have a sure thing. Nothing's a sure thing.
Yep.
But is there something that, like, everyone has, obviously you guys do like the scout grades on everything. And when it comes to Bowman baseball cards, the power cells, the speed cell, the kind of like those are the tools. Is there anything in particular that you look for when you're ranking a player? Like, are you more likely to rank a guy who has, a better approach, a better hit tool over the guys with the high ceilings that might have shaky floors? Or how do you go about, kind of balancing that out?
Yeah, you kind of have to balance it out because I mean I know I tend to err on the side of ceiling. Like if I have two players, I'm like, who I like, player B. I'm going to usually go for the guy with the higher ceiling. I think you win with stars. Like I think back like that 2005 White Sox team was kind of the exception rule where they just had a bunch of solid players and no real holes on the team and they won a World Series. Most time you win because you have superstars you're building your team around. So I will err on that side to exception. Like I'm not going to go. I'm not going to say take Spencer Jones over Kevin McGonigal because I mean that's a bad example because Kevin McGonigal's number two prospect baseball. But Spencer Jones has huge power, but he strikes out 35% of the time. So I'm gonna
Right.
temper like, okay, the guy's a really good athlete, really big guy, athletic for size, huge power, but factor that in. But I don't know. I mean, I think not that I'm just going to go for all guys who are contact hitters because that's not the most exciting profile in the world. But I do think when it all comes down to it, if you're close on two guys, I would lean towards the guy with the better hit tool because those guys usually a lot of times the guys with better hit tools, they're going to get to more of their power. They might not have as much raw power as say Spencer Jones, but Spencer Jones has got enough raw power to hit 40 homers a year in the big leagues, but he might strike out 250 times a year. So is he going to hit 40 home runs? Is he going to get to it? Whereas Kevin McGonigal is a tremendous hitter. Kevin McGonigal, I think, could win future batting championships. And he doesn't have the raw power that Spencer Jones has. But I think Kevin McGonigal probably going to get to 25 homers because he's such a good hitter. And that might be more homers than Spencer Jones. But I guess when you see somebody in person, the one thing I try to look for is how easy somebody does what he does. If a guy's, got huge power, but he's swinging from his heels and it's a max effort swing, that's not under control. That, same thing if you see a pitcher who's throwing hard, but like there's a lot of effort and you wonder if he's going to hold up. So I think the ease with which player, like you look at a guy like Judge or Ohtani, he just mentioned. I mean, those guys hit the ball 450 feet and it just looks like they're just, barely swinging the bat out there. They just make it look effortless. And again, I don't think it's hard to judge how good those guys are. And then if I'm looking from a statistical standpoint, I will, and not, I always look at this. It's not the only factor, but look at how well a player or a pitcher controls the strike zone. Because you can have all the stuff in the world, but if you aren't missing bats, well, that's telling you something. Now you can have guys like say Jacob Mizorowski, whose stuff is so crazy. They're like, I don't need Jacob Mizorowski to walk 3 guys per 9 innings. Like he's so unhittable that if he walks 4.5 guys per 9 innings, he's probably gonna do really well because he's not giving up any hits. But you have to make some exceptions. He obviously misses a lot of bats. And and the same thing for hitters. Like I'll want to look like, okay, is this guy controlling? Like this guy had a monster year. Is he controlling the strike zone? Now that said, you can fall into a trap. I mean, it goes back to Moneyball, where everybody's like, oh, walks. Like it's all about walks. That's the market inefficiency. Well, there are guys who draw walks in the minors because they take a lot of pitches. And some of the guys who take a lot of pitches aren't like discerning, they're passive. So you kind of have to like be careful. But like that is, I do think the most important thing to do, whether you're a hitter or a pitcher, is to control the strike zone, which you can do in a lot of different ways. Like you can maybe not have a great eye at the plate, but if you're a dangerous hitter, they're going to pitch around you. So you may not have to be as discerning as the guy who doesn't have as much power, who they're going to come over the plate and throw strikes too. And certainly for a pitcher, like I said, I mean, you don't have to have Greg Maddux control, but you have to have, I guess, control relative to how good your stuff is. So those are probably the things, the one visual thing I look for if I had to pick one, and then the one stat I would look at for hitters or pitchers.
It's funny you mention how easy things look because I live in Fort Myers, Florida, so I'm surrounded by Red Sox, Twins, spring training, and the Mighty Muscles is the single A Twins team. They play right down the street from me. they're in the same vision as Bradenton, who is the Pirates single A team. The first time Konnor Griffin played a single A game here, I said, I'm going to go watch him play. I've heard about him. And he's one of those players, like you mentioned. I walked up and I was like, oh, I wonder what number he is. And you look out on the field and you don't have to wonder. Everything looks, it's like he's not even playing in the same league as everybody else. So that kind of goes with like what you said about how easy it looks. Like some guys, you just look at them and they just make everything look so easy.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like I said before, I think the best prospect I've ever covered. It's hard for me to imagine there will be a better prospect than Alex Rodriguez. Like I just remember, and again, this was when he came out in the '93 draft, and I covered college. I was on the college baseball beat for Baseball America. It was my primary or my main beat. We all did a million things, and Darren Dreifert was really, really good. I was just like, wow, like this high school guy is better than Darren Dreifert. Like, and there's always sort of how Lou Piniella wanted the Mariners to draft Darren Dreifert, who went straight to the big leagues because he wanted the immediate help. The Mariners were starting to win a little bit. And so I was like, wow, this guy sounds pretty good. And I remember we used to do, I think they still do them, but when I was in Baseball America, I would do these draft report cards, where all these categories, and you talk to scouting directors. And the Mariners scouting director at the time was Roger Youngworth, who was like legendary scout, and not prone to hyperbole, like really nice, a gentleman is how you describe him, really nice guy. If I remember correctly, I think he was also the catcher in the old Home Run Derby. Remember that show from the 50s? I think he was the catcher. Like, because he was based out west. Anyway, he was one of the scouts involved with drafting Darryl Strawberry #1 for the Mets, and he was the scouting director when the Mariners owner wanted Mike Harkey when they had the #1 pick in 1987, and he's like, no, we got to take Ken Griffey Jr. So anyway, and he convinced the Mariners they should take A-Rod. So anyway, I'm talking to Roger about Alex Rodriguez, and Roger, again, he's not the type of guy who's going to hype his players. He's just very, not that he wasn't down on players, but he's just not going to oversell guys. But so we have all these categories: best hitter, A-Rod; best power, A-Rod; best runner, A-Rod; best strongest arm, A-Rod; best defensive player, A-Rod; quickest to the big leagues, even though he's in high school, A-Rod. I don't know. There might have been some more categories. He didn't pitch, so he couldn't get all those. And I just remember, and he's giving more description. We didn't just give the guy's name. And I'm just like, wow, this guy sounds like ridiculously good. And mind you, this was the era where there weren't a lot of power hitting shortstops yet. We hadn't gotten to that era yet. I remember telling him, like, Roger, I mean, this, I've heard a lot of good things about him. I was like, does he remind you of anybody? Like he just sounds almost too good to be true. And Roger said, I think described him as a much more athletic Cal Ripken. And I was like, geez, like, and that was true. Like that's what he, yeah. I mean, it's funny, like that. It reminded me of when I was at MLB.com and Ohtani came over. And before he came over, they're like, let's get a scouting report written. So as soon as he comes over, we could put him #1 on the prospect list, or wherever we put him at #1. And so I remember talking to scouts who covered the Japanese major leagues. And Ohtani just sounded too good to be true. Like, I was like, I think I toned it. I don't know if I toned it down, but I just remember writing it, and I was like, this sounds crazy, like how good Ohtani is. This like doesn't sound real. And the funny thing was, I think he's better than we gave him credit for. I think we had him as a little bit more of a pitcher than a hitter at the time. And it's just like sometimes you hear these scouting reports of guys, and they're like almost too good to be true. Yeah, I found our scouting report. I went 50 hit, which was light, 70 power, 65 run, 80 arm, 50 field. Then I went 80 fastball, 65 slider, 50 curve, 65 splitter, 50 changeup, 50 control. We had him as a 70 as a pitcher and a 60 as a hitter. And we were probably
that's pretty strong.
Well, we were at least light on the hitter. He's better than the 60, but that's what it kind of reminded me of when I was talking to Roger Youngworth about A-Rod. It was just like, this guy, like, this just sounds ridiculous to write this guy up. And just to take it to today, like, Konnor Griffin kind of feels the same way. Like, I haven't thought this through. Like A-Rod's always my default answer. Who's the best prospect? Konnor Griffin, if I was to list the most physically gifted prospects I've covered, I mean, and Bo Jackson was before my time at Baseball America. Bo Jackson probably be the most physically gifted prospect I could think of. But I mean, Konnor Griffin is probably up there with anybody. I mean, even Mike Trout, when he broke out his first year in full season ball, there were questions. Oh, how much power is he going to have? He might only be, average power. I don't remember a guy exploding on the scene like Konnor Griffin did.
Yeah, it's really been crazy to watch. And like you said, you had Ohtani at what, 70 power, 65 speed. What you have Konnor at what, is he 70? What is he?
Let's see. I didn't.
It's like
Jonathan Mayo does our Pirates stuff, so it's he gets the final.
So if Konnor doesn't go 50-50, I'm putting it on him.
Yeah, it's all his fault. And like I said, those grades just sounded ridiculous. It almost sounded ridiculous to give any player either one of those sets of grades, and I gave him both. Yeah, we have
Right.
65 power, 70 run on Konnor Griffin. Yeah,
that's pretty crazy. Now,
I mean,
the hardest part.
This is gonna sound great, but like, just look at the scouting reports. I mean, Konnor Griffin's like, basically we're talking Ohtani impact, but like a plus shortstop. Like, yeah, I guess he can't pitch. He pitched in high school, but you're talking about like Ohtani type of offensive impact. And oh, by the way, he'll be a plus defender at shortstop at the same time.
Yeah, it's literally insane. He breaks all of the models, it seems like.
Yeah.
Now, the hardest part when you were talking about like with Ohtani coming over, obviously you had to talk to scouts who had watched him in Japan. I've always wondered, how hard is it when you're doing your rankings to weigh players that are coming over from the DSL? Is that a similar process? And that, if you dominate against a league that's, not as comparable to what the players play against here, how do you go about, like when Jesus Madej has an insane DSL debut, how do you weigh that knowing that the competition is kind of
Yeah, you can't really do much with it. I mean, at least with Japan, which I think people consider roughly equivalent to AAA or between AAA and the majors. I mean, it's a different game. It doesn't always translate, but it's a high level of competition. If you play well in Japan, you obviously have some skills. The DSL is just the performances are all over the place. Like you talk about like looking at walk strikeout ratios, guys might be missing a plate by foot. So it's like you or I could take pitches. Like there'd be guys in DSL. We would draw some walks in the DSL. Just
for sure
by standing in the ball. Well, I don't know. We put the ball in play, but we could draw an occasional walk in the DSL. And it's hard. There aren't usually as many metrics available. There's not as much video available. So it's hard. I mean, I look at it, it's kind of like I look at college stats, Cape Cod League stats, even stats in the lower, in the complex leagues, I think are tough because especially in Arizona, infields are so hard. If you just hit the ball hard, it like shoots through the infield. But I look at it as good stats aren't a guarantee of future success, but bad stats are a red flag. Like if there's a guy hitting 210 in the DSL, it doesn't mean he's done, but I'm like, oh, like I'm not going to rank that guy real high. But just because, and then we could go look, there's guys who hit 370 in the DSL. That does not mean that guy is going to be good. And so I think it almost, to be honest, becomes kind of eye of the beholder. Like if there's a prospect you like and he does well in the DSL, you're like, aha, Joswar Gonzalez, who's really good. Joswar Gonzalez performed well in the DSL, or Kevin Alvarez performed well in the DSL. But at the same time, it's maybe slightly more useful than high school stats. So like I said, you want your guys to do good, but that doesn't guarantee future success. Like it's more, hey, this guy hit 3 times as many fly balls as ground balls, or this guy struck out 37% of the time. Then it's like, ooh, like maybe that guy's not that good. Maybe you need to temper things. But it's hard. It's hard when we rank guys who haven't even played yet, who's signed out international class. And it's the same thing. You're just going off, hey, when people saw these guys 2 years ago before they dropped off the face of the earth after agreeing with the team, this is what people thought. So it's tough. At least with the college guys, college stats, college isn't even comfortable to say class A, but you at least you play enough games and you can like cover it enough. You know what the quality competition is at various levels, and you could draw some conclusions just by how the best players do when they play the best players, type of thing.
It's funny that you mentioned that, you can only do so much good on your stat line in the DSL, but when you do bad, it really moves you the other way, because I have that all the time where players will put up good stat lines and people will be like, hey, should I buy this guy's cards? And then I look and he's been in the DSL for 3 seasons. And I'm like, that's probably not a good sign if it took you 2 tries in the DSL.
Cards. Don't buy anybody's cards based on what they do in the DSL. Like I wouldn't even look at, like, I would look at DSL performance to rule out, like, okay, I don't want to buy that guy. But there's no way I would just be looking at random DSL stat lines and going, "Hey, this guy hit 380 with 8 home runs. I'm in on that guy." Like, no,
And,
don't do that.
and you know what's funny is that that's how people will react. And I actually have my rankings. It's a formula of a kind, but the performance part of my rankings, DSL is basically, I rank it as if it's high school. It doesn't mean anything to me.
Like, what do you do with that? Like,
And people will always be like, "Oh, well, why is, Kevin Alvarez barely in your top 100?" And I'm like, "Well, because hitting in the DSL, it's like they might as well have not even played, like the way that
yeah, I mean, he played well, and I think you feel good about it. But again, like he's like same thing. He didn't make our top 100. He's very close. I think he's going to be a top 100 guy this year. But it's just hard to go crazy. I think we have Joseph Gonzalez might be the only guy who is a 2025 international signee who's on our current top 100 prospects list.
Yeah.
And I just want to see more. And then again, that's not to say that Kevin Alvarez carrying up the Florida Complex League matters that much either, but at least you get some more measurables, that you can bank on.
For sure. And when you're ranking those players, when I know that like a lot of like ETA can factor into like a prospect ranking for some person, but do you factor in team, like how much developmental success a team has had, like as a track record when you rank prospects, or not really?
Not really. I don't even really let the ETA, like when we're ranking, at least for me, I'm looking at, say, career value. So if like Luis Hernandez, who's this year's top international guy, I like Luis Hernandez. And he's not on our top 100, and maybe he should have been in retrospect. Anyway, Luis Hernandez is probably at least 3 or 4 years away. He's 17 years old. But like, I'm not going to say, oh, like I do our Giants list, and Gavin Keelan's a good prospect. He was 13th overall pick, hit in the SEC. Gavin Keelan's going to get there quicker, probably 2 or 3 years quicker than Luis Hernandez, because he's 3 or 4 years older. I don't care. I'd rather have Luis Hernandez because I think he's going to be better long term. And similarly, like it might, if I was going player A, player B, like I'm ranking them on our top 100, and this organization does a good job developing players or this type of player, and this one doesn't, that might be a small factor. But I think you kind of have to look at it in a vacuum. Just like I don't look at Charlie Condon and say, oh, his power is going to be enhanced by Coors Field. Like, it's like, I don't know, there's like, I guess in my mind, an ops plus, going to adjust a prospects plus. I'm not giving him extra credit because the ball's going to fly in Coors Field type of thing. Because like you could, like for instance, the Marlins, our organization recently has had trouble developing hitters. I'm not going to just be like, oh, Ivar Arquette, he's dead to me. Like, I'm not doing that. Like it doesn't work that way. But I like Owen Casey. Well, and I guess Owen Casey won't matter because he's going straight to big leagues. But I'm not going to just be like, oh, the Cubs do a better job than the Marlins developing hitters, so now I've got to devalue Owen Casey.
But you know what's funny is that in the people who, when it comes to buying cards, they absolutely do that. Like if it's a Marlins pitcher, they're like, I'm in, because the Marlins have a track record of, developing arms. When it comes to hitters, you look at like the track record of all their big international signings, all their first round picks, their string of busts. Everyone's like afraid, like,
Oh, I get it.
So you're saying that you look at that in a vacuum. You try not to give too much weight to.
Yeah. Like for instance, if the Marlins were picking number 1 this year and took Rock Chalowski,
you wouldn't,
I wouldn't be like, oh, I got to temper Rock Chalowski a little bit. Or if they took Grady Emerson or whoever they're taking the top, I wouldn't. I mean, it's in the back of your mind a little bit. Like, again, if I had Marlins hitter versus, whoever you want to play, Red Sox hitter, and I thought the two players were very comparable, then I might be like, I trust the Red Sox a little bit more. But I wouldn't say, I wouldn't take just randomly. First hitter of the Red Sox draft last year was Henry Godbout out of Virginia, 2nd round pick. And he can hit, we'll see how much power, but he's an offensive second baseman. The first hitter the Marlins took was number 7 overall pick, Ivar Arquette. I'm not going to say, give me Henry Godbout, and I'm off of Ivar Arquette because of those two organizations. I'm still taking Ivar Arquette over Henry Godbout.
It's funny you bring up, I was actually going to ask you about Chalowski. Now, when we're going to assume that McGonigal and Griffin and all these guys graduate, is he your front runner to be the number 1 overall prospect in 2027 over like a Jesus Madej, or you have anyone who has an edge right now?
That's a good question. It's funny. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know. Like, to me, I don't know if he'd be the front runner to be. I mean, he's the clear cut number one pick right now, probably the most since Adley Rutschman was in 2019. Although Grady Emerson's a really good player, and there's some other good players too. But like for me, he'd be in that tier with like Amade and DeVries. But if those guys go out and tear up Double A at 19 years old, like they're 2 years younger than Chalowski. So to me, you kind of have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Like to me, it would be okay. These guys are on a similar tier. What's the tiebreaker? Well, these guys are 2 years younger, but they played Double A. But I mean, I'm looking at our top 10 of our top 100 right now, and the vast majority of these guys are probably going to graduate. So it probably is going to be Rock versus Made and DeVries. I don't think Sebastian Walcott is going to graduate this year because of the injury. So that would be an interesting one. And then you have, like, I think the next guy who seems like there's no way he'd graduate would be Eli Willits, which would be an interesting one. But I think that one might come down to, honestly, how strong Eli Willits' season is. Because I think the one question that there is with Willits is exactly how much powers are going to be. And not that he's going to be a fully formed, he should be a senior this year. He reclassified. Eli Willits should be a high school senior.
Right.
So we're not going to know based on he hit, 11 home runs in single A, like what his power output's going to be. But I do think that one might come down to, like if Eli has like a so-so power year at age 18 or whatever, then maybe Rock gets the edge. But yeah, Rock could be the number one prospect a year from now. But my guess is it would probably be Jesus Made, if he goes out and has the season we think he's going to have in Double A.
I love that you mentioned the age, because I feel like a lot of people, you guys do a very good job of it, but a lot of people, one of the things that they overlook, and it's one of my favorite pieces when I rank prospects, is age versus level.
Yeah.
Like when these guys are playing as 18-year-olds in Double A, you have to give. I remember people were always baffled by Sebastian Walcott's rankings, and they're like, "Well, his stats aren't that good." And I'm like, "Well, when you consider that he's 18 and playing in Double A, he would be like a high school senior, and he's almost in the MLB. You have to take that into consideration at least a little bit."
A lot. I think you do a lot, and yeah, I mean, I look at. I think I'll tell you the other thing, that if I was buying baseball cards, or it's funny, even like fans are like, "Oh, you didn't rank this guy high enough." I think one thing that fans or collectors, both or fantasy players, whoever, lose sight of sometimes is you have to be realistic about what position these guys are going to play. It's very easy to look at guys playing positions when they break into pro ball and being like, oh, like this guy could be an outstanding catcher. Well, the guy might not be a very good catcher, and he's not going to stick behind the plate. Like, look, I like Samuel Basallo, and I like Alfredo Duno. Those Josue Briseño is probably a better example. I think Josue Briseño is a first baseman, so that's going to affect his prospect value long term. Or you look at, the shortstops, and Ken McGonigal is going to be great, but he might be more of a second baseman or third baseman. I think he's going to be fine. Weatherholt's going to wind up at second base. Walcott could wind up at third base. Miller and Ethan Holiday, I still think those guys are probably third basemen. Which are still valuable positions, but you'll get guys like, I don't know, Kyle Schwarber always jumps to mind. And I never thought Kyle Schwarber was going to be a catcher. And obviously, I actually think, I say this all the time, I think him getting hurt was the best thing that could happen to Kyle Schwarber's career, because in 2016, he was going to be like, to Schwarber's credit, he wanted to prove he could catch. Like he was going to work at it. But the amount of work that goes into becoming a catcher, I think he would have spent a lot of time doing that. He would have been at best an adequate catcher that you're not going to have your pitchers necessarily want to throw to, or at least be your primary catcher. You're going to get beat up behind the plate, and it's going to, like, I always think with guys like that, just let the guy hit and make the most out of his bat. And I think tearing up his knee in that outfield collision in the first series of the year, at the same time, coincidentally, Wilson Contreras, who'd been buried in the organization, emerged as one of the best catching prospects in the minors, and they just kind of moved on without Schwarber as a catcher. And there's no way Schwarber would have all the home runs he has now if he stayed behind the plate. But like, people were all excited about Kyle Schwarber catching, and it's like, the guy can really hit, but I don't think that guy's going to be a big league catcher. And
and the same, like you said, the same thing with, when Basallo was coming up, and they obviously had Adley Rutschman struggled, but they have Adley Rutschman, and I remember looking at Basallo's stats and the level that he was getting promoted. My first thought was, not only is he probably too big to play catcher right now, but if they decide that his bat is so good that they want him in the MLB lineup at 20, at some point you would imagine that he's probably better off not having to develop that skill behind the plate and just, as you said with Schwarber, just letting the bat play.
I would almost do that with Basayo. I mean, you need Rutschman to bounce back too, but I just think Basayo's bat can be so special, and I think he can throw, but I think it's more of kind of a fringy catcher. It's very similar. He doesn't have the same kind of power. Moises Ballesteros with the Cubs, who the Cubs have this big kind of conundrum because there's nothing left for him to do offensively in the minors. It's a waste of time for him to get AAA at bats. Moises Ballesteros can hit, but he's not a very good catcher, and this is a contending team. And your pitchers are not going to want to be throwing to Moises Ballesteros. So he needs reps behind the plate to get better at catcher, and you can't really give them to him in the big leagues, but his bat's ready for the big leagues. And he's also, in his case, he's 5'8". So I remember I wrote this up last year. The last 5'8" first baseman who was a regular in the big leagues was in the 1930s. There aren't 5'8" first basemen. So Moises Ballesteros, it's like, even trying to, like, if you're a fantasy player or a collector or whatever, like, how good is he going to be? Because if Moises Ballesteros is a catcher, he's going to be one of the best hitting catchers in the big leagues, but he might be a DH. So, like, yeah, how do you justify that? So anyway, I just think that, I think fans, when they're like, oh, you've rated this guy too low, it's like, well, that guy's probably not playing the position you think.
Do you think, as you mentioned with Ballesteros, where his bat is to the point where he's outgrown having to stay in AAA, but the glove might not be there, do you think that's something that we could see with Rainiel Rodriguez, since he is, I mean, we saw him go, complex to A to high A at 18. Did he reach high A? Maybe it was just single A.
I think so. Maybe he got a taste. But yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it'll be interesting with him. I mean, they have catchers ahead of him. Like, Bernal's a really good defender. Jimmy Crooks is a really good defender. So they don't have to rush. He played 4 games in high A at the end of the year. I think he's young enough, because he's only 19, that he's got some time, but that's going to be another interesting one. And he's young, but if you're projecting it out, he's probably a fringy catcher. And so do you want, now I will say he's just played the very lowest levels of the minors. So I kind of like to, I'm not ready to go like, hey, this guy is, going to Hall of Fame either. He's very promising. Like, the bat looks really, really good, but I like to see him above single A. But, if he hits like he did last year, then I think you have that question. Like, do we continue to develop him as a catcher, which is also going to take more time? Or if the guy's bat is as good as it looked last year, do we want to just expedite this guy and get him to the big leagues?
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of day. I know you're busy this time of year. We really appreciate the top 30 that came out. As I said, the Bowman people, love when you drop those lists, especially people who collect their individual teams. They love to see that, progression each year, who got higher. So I really appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, no, it was fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Jim for taking time out of his day to talk prospects with me. Make sure you be on the lookout for our next episode, which is going to be our deep dive in the 2025 Bowman's Best. I'm actually about to rip a personal box right now on stream for you guys to see. We're also going to have Grand Salami from Grand Salami Breaks come on and talk about what he's seen in the first few cases of the product that he's opened, who you should be looking for, what cards you should be chasing, and how he rates the product overall.